My name is Elizabeth, but most people call me Beth. I work as a marketing director at a tech company in Boston. 6 years ago, my life changed when my older sister Mary's marriage fell apart. Mary and her husband, James, had a terrible relationship for years. He was selfish, immature, and as soon as they divorced, he practically vanished from their son Aiden's life. Aiden was only 10 when it happened, and overnight he lost his father, his home, and his sense of security. James refused to pay proper child support, claiming financial hardship despite working a decent job. He stopped calling Aiden after a few months, and the rare checks he sent weren't enough to cover even the basics. Mary and Aiden had no choice but to move in with our parents. Dad and Mom, Robert and Carol, welcomed them, of course. They turned the basement into a bedroom for Aiden and gave Mary their spare room. Our parents are retired teachers living on fixed pensions, so while they could offer a roof, they couldn't provide much financial help. At that time, I had established myself at work and was finally making good money after years of paying off student loans. I was living in my own rented apartment downtown. It wasn't huge, but it was mine, and I loved my independence. I was saving for my future, excited about building my career and enjoying my life as a professional woman in my 40s. Then came that Sunday dinner at my parents' house. I'll never forget it. The snow was falling outside, and we were all gathered around the fireplace after the meal: Dad, Mom, Mary, Aiden, and me. Aiden was telling us about his science project, and I remember feeling a moment of genuine happiness that he seemed to be adjusting despite everything. After dessert, while Aiden was in the living room playing video games, my dad cleared his throat. Beth, we need to talk about something important. Mom nodded, folding her hands on the table, her gold wedding band catching the light. It's about Mary's situation. I glanced at my sister, who was looking down at her plate, tracing circles with her finger. Mary's having a really tough time, Dad continued, his voice taking on that same tone he used when discussing serious matters during his teaching years. She found a job at that department store, but it barely pays minimum wage. And with Aiden growing so fast and needing new clothes and school supplies, we were thinking. Mom chimed in, since you're doing so well at your job, maybe you could help your sister out a bit. I wasn't completely surprised. I'd been expecting something like this, and I wasn't against helping. Mary was my sister, and Aiden was my only nephew. But something in my chest tightened as I looked between my parents and Mary, who still wouldn't meet my eyes. Sure, I said, calculating in my head what I could afford. I can help. How about $700 a month? It was a significant amount for me, but I could manage it if I cut back on some of my own expenses and delayed my plans for a vacation. The relief on Mary's face was immediate, and for a moment, I saw the sister I grew up with. That would be, that would help so much. Her eyes welled with tears. Thank you, Beth. And just like that, I became a regular contributor to Mary and Aiden's life. Every month, I transferred $700 to Mary's account. It became as routine as paying my rent or utilities. As Aiden got older, he needed more than just basics. He wanted to learn programming and was interested in foreign languages. I thought these were great interests that could help his future, so I paid for those courses too. For his 11th birthday, I gave him a PlayStation 5 that he'd been dreaming about. His face lit up when he opened it, and that made all the extra work I was taking on worth it. The following year, I gave him a new smartphone for his 12th birthday. For Christmas, I usually went all out: nice headphones, a tablet, whatever he was into that year. I wanted him to have nice things despite his parents' divorce. Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering if I was overdoing it, but seeing him happy made me push those thoughts aside. Mary eventually moved out of our parents' house, finding a small two-bedroom apartment for her and Aiden. I helped with the security deposit and first 3 months of rent to get them settled. I visited them often, bringing groceries or taking them out for dinner. During our family dinners, which happened at least twice a month at our parents' house, Mary talked a lot about her dating life. She was determined to find someone new, going from one dating app to another, meeting different men every week. Her social media was full of restaurant photos, new clothes, and weekend trips. What she rarely mentioned was her job situation. I knew from our parents that she was constantly jumping between positions: retail stores, administrative work, waitressing, never staying anywhere long enough to build stability. My parents were covering most of her basic expenses, while my money went to extras for her and Aiden. A year after I started helping Mary, I received a significant promotion at work, nearly doubling my salary. I was thrilled and decided to start saving for a down payment on my own condo instead of continuing to rent. At the celebratory work dinner, my colleagues toasted my success. To Beth, who definitely earned this, my boss said, raising her glass, "Your dedication has paid off." But at the next family dinner, the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. Dad asked how work was going as he carved the roast. "Actually, I have good news," I said, trying to keep my tone casual. "I got a promotion. I'm thinking of saving for my own place now." Mary's head snapped up, her fork pausing halfway to her mouth. "A promotion? How much more are you making?" I hesitated but answered honestly. "It's nearly double what I was making before." Mary's eyes narrowed slightly, and I recognized that look from our childhood arguments. "Well," she said, her voice taking on an edge, "that means you can afford to help me twice as much too, right? $1,400 a month instead of $700? I nearly choked on my water. "What, Mary? That's... It's only fair," she interrupted, setting down her fork with a deliberate motion. "If you're making twice as much, why shouldn't Aiden and I benefit too? We're family." I looked at my parents, expecting them to say something, to point out how inappropriate this demand was. Instead, they both nodded. "Your sister has a point, Beth," Mom said quietly, not meeting my eyes. "Family helps family, and it's not like you have children of your own to support." Her words stung, hitting an old wound about my single status at 45. I felt cornered. 3 pairs of eyes were staring at me, waiting. Aiden was the only one not present, having gone to a friend's house after eating. "Actually," Mary said, leaning forward, her voice suddenly sweet, $1,500 would be better. Aiden needs braces soon, and his programming courses are getting more expensive." Under pressure, feeling like I had no choice, I nodded. "Fine, $1,500 a month." But as I drove home that night through Boston's snow-covered streets, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right in this arrangement. It felt less like helping and more like an obligation, or worse, an expectation. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, tears threatening to spill. "What am I doing?" I whispered to my empty car. "When did I become an ATM instead of a sister?" The new financial arrangement settled in quickly. Every month, $1,500 left my account and went into Mary's. I had to cut back on my own expenses and extend my timeline for saving up for a down payment, but I managed. I told myself it was temporary. Eventually, Mary would find a stable job and get back on her feet. When Aiden's 13th birthday came around, I showed up at my parents' house with a mid-range electric scooter. Something told me I needed to set a boundary. Aiden seemed pleased enough when he opened it, but Mary sat in the corner with a sour expression all evening. I probably didn't live up to her expectations. The next 2 years passed in a similar pattern. I kept sending money, though I started to notice that Mary's social media showed frequent restaurant outings, new clothes, and weekend trips that seemed beyond what her part-time retail job could support. Meanwhile, I was putting in extra hours at work, taking on additional projects, and slowly building up my savings for a place of my own. Finally, at 45, I managed to buy my first condo. It wasn't grand, a one-bedroom unit in a decent but not fancy neighborhood, but it was mine. The down payment had taken every penny I'd saved, and the mortgage payments were steep, but I felt proud. I decided to host a housewarming party. I invited family, friends from work, and a few neighbors. When Mary and Aiden arrived, her eyes darted around, taking in every detail of my new place. Aiden, now 14, muttered a congratulations and immediately asked for my Wi-Fi password. Later, as I was refilling the snack bowls in the kitchen, I overheard Mary whispering to one of our cousins, "Aiden and I deserve a place like this more than she does. We're the ones cramped in that tiny rental." My hand froze mid-reach for the chips. The unfairness of her statement stung, but I decided not to confront her. This was my special day, and I wasn't going to let her ruin it. Over the next year, I noticed a new pattern emerging. Aiden, now 15, began dropping hints about cars whenever I saw him. It started with sly mentions of friends whose parents were already planning their 16th birthday presents, casual comments about which models he thought were cool. At first, I didn't think much of it. Most teenagers get excited about driving. But then I noticed Mary posting photos of Aiden on her social media, standing next to shiny new cars at dealerships, captions like someone's getting excited about his birthday next year. One photo showed Aiden behind the wheel of a new Audi with the caption, trying out his dream car. Now we just need a generous fairy godmother to make it happen. I laughed when I saw it. The manipulation was so obvious it was almost comical. A new car, the latest smartphones, and laptops I'd given him over the years had already stretched my budget, but a car, especially the luxury models they were posing with, was on an entirely different level. 2 weeks before Aiden's 16th birthday, Mary called to confirm I was coming to the party at our parents' house. Of course, I said. I wouldn't miss it. Great, she said, her voice oddly cheerful. You're bringing your gift, right? Something special? I felt that familiar tightness in my chest. I've got it covered, I replied neutrally. Aiden's so excited, she continued. He keeps talking about what his cool aunt might get him. I refused to take the bait. I went online and ordered the latest iPhone model for Aiden, an expensive gift by any normal standard. I thought it would be practical, something he'd use every day. I had a gift wrap and tucked a nice card inside, genuinely hoping he'd appreciate it. On the day of Aiden's party, I arrived at my parents' house to find it filled with relatives, some of Mary's friends, and several of Aiden's classmates. The atmosphere was festive, with balloons and streamers everywhere. When it was time for presents, everyone gathered in the living room. Aiden opened gifts from his friends first: video games, headphones, gift cards. My parents gave him an expensive watch. Then Mary handed him an envelope from her. Sweetie, she said. Aiden opened it and pulled out a card. Inside was a voucher for driving lessons. Thanks, Mom, he said, giving her a hug. Then he looked around expectantly. Is that everything? Mary's eyes fixed on me. Beth still has her gift. All eyes turned to me as I handed Aiden the neatly wrapped box. He took it, and I noticed a flicker of disappointment cross his face even before he opened it. He tore off the paper, opened the box, and stared at the new iPhone. There was a moment of complete silence. He didn't say anything at first, just held the phone, his face unreadable. Then he looked up at me, his expression a mix of disappointment and something else. Entitlement? This is it? He asked quietly, the words hanging in the air. The room went silent. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. Aiden, I began. I thought you could have given me something better, he said, his voice controlled but cold. Everyone knows you make good money now. I stared at him, stunned by the change in him, the echo of his mother's attitudes. Mary stepped forward. She doesn't understand what you need, she said with quiet contempt. We've been hinting for months that you need a car, and she brings this instead. Something inside me snapped. All the years of being treated like an ATM, all the increasing demands, the lack of gratitude, it all came to a boiling point. This is an $1,100 phone, I said, my voice trembling but determined. I am not buying a car. I've supported you both for 6 years, paid for classes, birthdays, everything. I'm not a bank. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. If you don't like my gift, I'll take it back. I reached for the iPhone box, my hands shaking slightly. The room was dead silent. Aiden looked shocked. Mary's face had turned red with anger. Our relatives shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. No one spoke as I collected my purse and jacket. As I reached the door, I felt a tear slide down my cheek. I fumbled with my keys, dropping them once before managing to pick them up and get out the door. I drove home in tears, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I couldn't believe what had just happened. 6 years of financial support, and this was how they treated me, like I was nothing but a wallet with legs. My phone started ringing as soon as I got home. Mary. I rejected the call. Then my mother. Rejected. My father. Rejected. They called one after another, like they were taking turns. I turned my phone to silent and poured myself a glass of wine, trying to calm down. Around 9 p.m., I checked my phone, 12 missed calls and a flood of text messages. I reluctantly opened them. Mom, Beth, you embarrassed us in front of everyone. Call me back immediately. Mary, how dare you walk out like that? Aiden is devastated. Dad, we raised you better than this. Your behavior was shameful. Mary again. You're selfish and greedy, always were. You owe Aiden an apology and a proper gift. The messages continued, each one more accusatory than the last. Not one of them acknowledged that maybe, just maybe, Aiden's reaction to an $1,100 phone was inappropriate. Not one considered that I had any right to decide how to spend my own money. I didn't respond. I needed time to think, to process what had happened. I took Monday off work and spent the day in my apartment, ignoring the continuing calls and messages. By Tuesday, the tone of the text had shifted from angry to manipulative. Mom, we're your family, Beth. Family sticks together no matter what. Mary, Aiden's really upset. He cried himself to sleep. He thinks you hate him. The guilt tripping might have worked before, but something had changed in me. I was seeing the pattern clearly for the first time, how they had progressively demanded more and more, how my generosity had been reframed as an obligation. Wednesday evening, Mary called again. This time, I answered. Finally, she snapped. I've been trying to reach you for days. I know, I said calmly. I needed time to think. Well, while you've been thinking, I've been dealing with a heartbroken teenager. You need to make this right, Beth. Make what right exactly? That I didn't buy your son a car? She sighed dramatically. Look, we can move past this. Aiden will accept your apology if you make it up to him with the right gift. No, Mary, I said firmly. I'm done. I'm not buying Aiden a car, and starting now, I'm not sending you money anymore. There was a moment of stunned silence before she exploded. You can't do that. We depend on that money. You have no right to cut us off. It's my money, Mary. I have every right. You selfish bitch. She screamed. After everything we've been through. Goodbye, Mary, I said, and hung up. Then I blocked her number, along with my parents. I also blocked them all on social media. I needed a clean break, time to reestablish boundaries without their constant pressure and guilt. True to my word, I canceled the automatic monthly transfer to Mary's account. The money stayed in my bank account, and it felt strangely liberating. The next day, I had just returned home from work when I heard loud knocking on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole and saw Mary and my mother standing there, both with angry expressions. Beth, open this door right now, my mother demanded. We know you're in there. Your car is outside, Mary added, pounding harder. I stood quietly, not responding. You can't just cut us off, Mary shouted through the door. Aiden needs that money for his programming classes. Beth, this is childish, my mother called. Open the door so we can talk about this reasonably. I finally spoke through the door. I'm not opening it. I have nothing to say to either of you. You have no right to stop supporting your sister, my mother said. Family helps family. I'm done being treated like an ATM, I replied. I've helped for 6 years. It's enough. Mary kicked the door hard. You owe us that money. I don't owe you anything, I said, my voice steady. And if you don't leave now, I'm calling the police. You wouldn't dare, Mary hissed. I took out my phone. Try me. There was muttered conversation between them, and finally, I heard them walking away. My mother's final words drifted back. You'll regret this, Beth. Family is all you have in the end. In the following days, I learned from a cousin that Mary and my parents were telling relatives that I had suddenly abandoned them financially for no reason. They claimed I had promised to support Aiden through college, but had broken my word out of selfishness. Fortunately, most of our extended family knew better. They'd seen firsthand how much I'd given over the years. My Aunt Emma even called to check on me. I wasn't at Aiden's party, Beth, she said, but what happened wasn't right. You've done more than enough for them. Her support meant a lot, but the situation with my immediate family remained painful. I threw myself into work, started therapy, and focused on rebuilding my social life outside of family obligations. For the first time in years, I had money to spend on myself without guilt. I took a short vacation, joined a book club, started dating again. 3 months passed without contact, then six. I learned through the family grapevine that Mary had been forced to move to a smaller apartment and get a full-time job. Aiden had dropped his programming classes. My parents were complaining about helping them financially. Sometimes I felt guilty, wondering if I'd been too harsh. But then I'd remember Aiden's face as he looked at my gift with disappointment, Mary's contemptuous words, my parents' betrayal. 6 months after the blow-up, on a rainy Tuesday evening, I was leaving my office building when I heard someone call my name. I turned to see Aiden standing by the entrance, soaked from the rain, looking older and somehow different than I remembered. Aunt Beth, he said, his voice deeper than before. Can we talk? I hesitated, surprised to see him. Does your mother know you're here? He shook his head. No, and I'd like to keep it that way. I studied him for a moment, then nodded. There's a coffee shop around the corner. We walked silently through the rain, ordered drinks, and found a quiet corner table. Aiden seemed nervous, fidgeting with his cup. I'm listening, I said finally. He took a deep breath. I came to say I'm sorry. About my birthday. About how I acted. It was wrong. I was surprised by his directness. What brought this on? Reality, I guess, he said with a weak smile. When you stopped sending money, everything changed. Mom had to work full time. I had to drop some activities. At first, I was angry at you. Mom kept saying you were selfish and that you'd come around eventually. He paused, taking a sip of his hot chocolate. But you didn't, and after a while, I started thinking about everything you'd done for us over the years. All the gifts, the money, the classes. I realized how much I'd taken it all for granted. His eyes met mine. When I got a job at the grocery store 3 months ago, I understood even better. Working for my own money made me see things differently. I felt a mix of emotions, pride that he'd matured, sadness for the rift, anger still simmering beneath the surface. I appreciate you saying that, Aiden. It means a lot. Can you forgive me? He asked, looking younger suddenly, more like the boy I remembered. I'm working on it, I said honestly. It's not just about the birthday. It's about years of being treated like I was obligated to support you and your mom. That hurt. He nodded. I understand. I just miss you, and I want you to know I'm different now. I don't expect anything from you. I felt something soften inside me. We can work on rebuilding our relationship. It will take time, though. Relief washed over his face. That's all I'm asking for. Does your mother know you've got a job? I asked. Yeah, but she thinks it's stupid. Says I should be focusing on school, not wasting time for minimum wage. But I like earning my own money. I smiled. I'm proud of you for that, Aiden. We talked for another hour, catching up on his school and friends. When we finally parted, he asked, can we meet again sometime? Maybe next week? I'd like that, I said. But let's keep it between us for now. I'm not ready to deal with your mom or my parents yet. He nodded. It'll be our secret. As I watched him walk away, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. There was still a long way to go, but that small reconnection felt like the beginning of something new, a relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. For the first time in months, I felt hopeful. Epilogue. It's been 8 months since Aiden and I had that coffee together. We've settled into a routine of meeting every couple of weeks. Sometimes we grab dinner. Sometimes we just walk around Boston and talk. He's grown so much in this short time, not just physically, but in maturity and perspective. I got promoted at the store, he told me last week, his face lighting up with pride. I'm a shift supervisor now. More responsibility, better pay. That's fantastic, Aiden, I said, genuinely proud of him. How does it feel? Good. Really good. I'm saving up for a used car, he added with a shy smile. Nothing fancy, Just something reliable to get around in. I nodded, appreciating the irony, but saying nothing about it. The Aiden who had expected a luxury car for his birthday was gone. In his place was this thoughtful young man who understood the value of working for what he wanted. Our conversations never involve requests for money, and I don't offer any. It's a clean relationship now, based on genuine connection rather than financial dependence. Sometimes he tells me about his struggles or asks for advice, but never for cash, and that makes all the difference. As for Mary and my parents, I haven't spoken to any of them since that day at my apartment door. Through Aiden and other relatives, I know that Mary continues to struggle financially. She jumps from job to job, never finding stability. My parents still support her, covering her rent when she falls short and helping with Aiden's school expenses. Sometimes I wonder if I should reach out, try to mend those relationships. But then I remember how they treated me, not as a daughter or sister, but as a resource to be exploited. The wound is still too fresh, the betrayal too deep. Maybe someday I'll be ready to forgive them, but not yet. For now, I'm focused on healing myself and nurturing the one family relationship that's proven worth saving. Aiden keeps our relationship secret from his mother and my parents. Mom still gets angry whenever your name comes up, he told me once. And Grandma and Grandpa take her side. It's easier if they don't know we talk. I found peace in this new arrangement. My financial situation has improved significantly. Without the drain of supporting Mary, I've been able to furnish my condo properly, build an emergency fund, and even start planning a real vacation, my first in years. More importantly, I've learned valuable lessons about boundaries, about the difference between generosity and exploitation, about the complexity of family dynamics. I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and others, is to say no. Last week, I ran into my mother at the grocery store. We made eye contact across the produce section. For a moment, I thought she might approach me, that there might be an opportunity for reconciliation. Instead, she turned her cart around and walked in the opposite direction. It hurt, but I understood. Some bridges take a long time to rebuild, if they can be rebuilt at all. I'm not closing any doors permanently, but I'm also not rushing to open them. Time will tell what happens with those relationships. Continuing with the revised story, as I walked back to my car that day, watching my mother disappear down another aisle of the grocery store, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. The sadness was for what might have been, a family that supported each other equally, that celebrated successes rather than viewing them as opportunities for gain. The relief was in knowing I'd finally broken free from an unhealthy cycle. My therapist calls this complicated grief, mourning the loss of relationships that are still technically there but fundamentally broken. In our sessions, she's helped me understand that my feelings of guilt aren't evidence that I made the wrong choice, but rather the residue of years of emotional manipulation. You're grieving the family you wished you had, she told me, not the one that actually exists. Those words resonated deeply. For years, I'd been pouring money and energy into a fantasy that if I just gave enough, my sister would get on her feet, my parents would recognize my sacrifices, and we'd become the supportive family I longed for. The reality was that my giving had enabled Mary's dependence and entitlement, not helped her grow. Last month, Aiden and I met at a cafe near his school. He came rushing in, a newspaper clutched in his hand. "Aunt Beth, look," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. He unfolded the paper to show me a used car advertisement he'd circled. It's a 2009 Honda Civic, low mileage, and the price just dropped. I've been saving up, and I think I'm almost there. I looked at the ad, then at his excited face. "That's a reliable car. Good choice." "I was hoping you'd say that," he said, fidgeting with his napkin. Would you? Would you come with me to look at it?" "The seller's available this weekend." "Of course," I said, touched that he'd asked for my opinion rather than my wallet. "I'd be happy to." That Saturday, we met at the address listed in the ad. The car was indeed in good condition for its age, a sensible, practical vehicle that would serve him well. Aiden walked around it slowly, asking intelligent questions about maintenance history and gas mileage. The owner, impressed by his thoroughness, seemed inclined to knock a bit more off the price. As Aiden and the seller discussed payment details, I stood back, watching my nephew handle himself with a maturity that made my chest swell with pride. This was the same boy who'd once expected a luxury car as a birthday gift, now carefully counting out cash he'd earned himself for a used Honda. After the paperwork was signed and keys exchanged, Aiden drove his new purchase around the block, beaming with a sense of accomplishment I'd never seen in him before. "I did it," he said when he parked again. "My own car, bought with my own money. How does it feel?" I asked. He thought for a moment. "Better. Much better than if someone had just given it to me." On the drive home, Aiden grew quiet. "Finally," he said, "Mom's going to be upset when I bring this home. She still talks about how you should have bought me a car." "What will you tell her?" I asked. "The truth. That I wanted to do this myself." He gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. "But I'm not looking forward to it." I reached over and squeezed his shoulder. "You're stronger than you think, Aiden." A week later, he texted me. "Mom freaked out about the car. Said I should have waited for a better option. But Grandpa actually stood up for me. Said he was proud I bought it myself." It was a small crack in the united front they presented against me, and though I tried not to read too much into it, it gave me hope that perhaps my father was beginning to see something valuable in self-reliance. As for me, life has settled into a new rhythm. I've started dating a kind, thoughtful man I met through my book club. I've redecorated my condo and taken up painting, something I've always wanted to try, but never had time for when my evenings were filled with worry about Mary and Aiden. My emergency fund has grown, and I'm planning a trip to Europe next spring, my first real vacation in over a decade. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I still wonder what might have happened if I kept quiet at Aiden's birthday party, if I continued to be the family ATM. Would Mary have ever gotten a stable job? Would Aiden have learned the value of work? Would I have postponed my own life indefinitely for their benefit? I'll never know for sure, but what I do know is this. Boundaries aren't just barriers to keep others out. They're frameworks that shape healthier relationships for everyone involved. By saying no to being exploited, I gave Aiden the chance to say yes to responsibility. By stepping back, I created space for him to step forward. That's the lesson I hold onto on the days when guilt tries to creep back in. When I see my mother in the grocery store and she turns away. When I drive past our family home and wonder if I'll ever be welcome there again. Some people might see my story as a sad one, a family fractured, relationships damaged. But I see it differently. I see it as a story of growth, of painful but necessary change, of finding the courage to value myself enough to say, "This is not okay." And in that courage, I've discovered a strength I never knew I had. A strength that allows me to look toward the future with hope rather than dread, to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation, and to define family not by blood alone, but by how we treat each other. Aiden and I have plans to meet for dinner next week. He's bringing his girlfriend, someone he's been dating for a few months now. "I think you'll really like her, Aunt Beth," he told me. "She's studying computer science, works part-time like me. She gets it." That simple phrase, "she gets it," speaks volumes. It tells me that Aiden is choosing people in his life who understand the value of work, of independence, of earning your way. It tells me that despite the environment he was raised in, he's finding his own path. And that, more than anything else, makes all the difficult choices worthwhile.